Okay, we're now recording. This is going to be Sakai Rubrics. We're going to have this recorded for you and we'll share it with you later today. This is the SETLO staff. We actually changed our name and was approved earlier this year. So we are now the Center for Teaching, Learning, and Online Education. I'm Corey Bauer. I'll be hosting this session. And my colleagues are also in here in case you want to contact us for any questions or follow us on LinkedIn. And these links they'll go out to where they go for you to connect. This session, it will be an hour or less. Try to do a little bit faster than an hour. You can have another tab or another device going where you open Sakai and kind of look at some of these things that we talk about. This is a pretty small group, so if you just want to interrupt me verbally and ask questions, that's fine. If you want to put it in the chat, I'll stop and check it every few minutes to make sure there's something there. And if there's something that's more complicated that you want to ask, you can send us an email or make a help ticket with our new SETLO ID. So the objectives for this session: 3 benefits to using rubrics, what makes a strong rubric, how the structure works, there's a difference between numerical and analytical, and demonstrate some proficiency in how to build these in Sakai and attach them to specific assignments. So let's start with theory first about why you would use rubrics and why they're beneficial to put time into. So for one, rubrics are very clear about what you're expecting students to do. And this saves you time of having to repeat it to students a lot, where you have to keep telling them, I'm looking for this, this, and this. It's in your rubric, and you don't have to repeat that all the time. And then there's levels of performance of what's basically bad, okay, and great. So when you're evaluating, it should be more objective because you have these very clear levels of description. So anybody who is using the same rubric to grade would probably come out with the same score in the end. And this is helpful when you have multiple people teaching the same sections of courses, that they're kind of being evaluated in the same way. And because I said that it has clear expectations, you don't have to give as much feedback. It increases your grade time because then you can just click the boxes of performance levels, that's your feedback, and it goes right to the student. So it does pay off in the end in terms of time. So a good rubric has very descriptive tasks. Often when we're developing courses, we'll get a rubric sent to us, but it's really just a checklist. It's not telling me what is a good example or a bad example of that specific task. That's what a rubric actually does. It's related to the learning objectives. So if you have learning objectives of here's what you're looking for, those need to be kind of related to what's in the rubric. If you're looking for this piece, this piece, this piece in a very specific way. If the rubric is written clear enough, students should be able to grade themselves before they turn something in and come up with a similar score of what the instructor would do, because it's very objective on you did this or you did not do that. It typically has 3 to 5 tasks. We've seen some rubrics that get pretty big and unwieldy, but to make them manageable, they should just have a few tasks, a few performance levels, so it's something that's very quick and easy to get through. And the descriptions between what's bad or okay or great should be very clear. So those distinctions are very clear. So for example, when I'm saying about categories, you're looking for these things in the student's work. So for example, if they're writing a paper, their ideas are kind of one thing, how they've structured the paper, what kind of word choice did they use, and did they do spelling and grammar and punctuation, the things you kind of expect anyway. Because when you're grading with a rubric, sometimes it gets overwhelming with all the things you're trying to keep track of what the student's doing. But if you break them into categories, you can focus on those things specifically and not worry about the other stuff. You're just looking at, was their word choice appropriate? Was it spelled and grammar and stuff? Because sometimes those can get distracting to an evaluator. And then within each category, you have levels of performances. So these typically go, they can go up or down or across, but your category for, say, spelling and grammar, was there no errors? It was perfect. They nailed everything. Was there a little bit? Was there a little bit more? Or did they really bomb that section of their work? So if you have these very distinct written descriptors, it makes it very clear about how the student performed in that task level, and that's your feedback. So this is why we kind of say keep it simple. Just, I typically do 3 to 4. Either they didn't do it at all, say if they had to have a category of references. Maybe that wasn't applied at all. There might be another category over here, 0 is missing. But for generally, keep it simple, so it's something simple for you to grade. Now, there is a caveat, especially when we're talking about Sakai. In reality, there are actually 2 kinds of rubrics. There's numerical versus analytical. For Sakai to work with a rubric, it needs to be numerical because there's math happening on the back end that goes to the gradebook. So if you're going to create a rubric that you want graded and you want it calculated in the student's grade, it has to use numbers. If you're using a rubric, typically for face-to-face classes or a rough draft, so to say, you can create a rubric that's analytical, and it gives a general descriptor at the end of did the student kind of pass, meet expectations, that sort of thing. So the numerical has to have numbers and it's specific. The analytical one is more like, America's Got Talent. Somebody says, yeah, that was pretty good. Here's the things you could work on, but it's not attached to a number. This would be more for drafts, performances that you're kind of getting ready to do before you actually grade. But do keep in mind, Sakai does need the numbers to do. And when we talk about numbers, keeping it simple so it's not a big chunk or a jump between the categories. So for example, if you have 30 points in a task, just that, say spelling and grammar or whatever, if you go from 0 to 15 to 35 or 50, it's hard to determine what falls in between those points. So if you keep it simple, it's a little bit more clear. So if you have a range of 0 to 5, how do you determine if someone got a 3? So it becomes a little bit harder when you have these big gaps in the numbers, because you're really looking for these minute differences in performance levels to really narrow back your feedback. Now in Sakai, you can adjust your rubric and actually give them a 3 instead of a 0 or 5 in that category, but that would kind of prompt you to have to write a specific personalized feedback about why did you give not a 0 but not a 5. You gave something in the middle. So if you keep them small between, it's easier and faster for you to grade in the overall scheme. Another thing about points is deciding what your top level performance is going to look like. We have a lot of people use proficient as like a medium level, and then they're trying to get points for students who went above and beyond that. And when you do that in terms of points, what you're really saying is the top score is the expectation because students expect A, B, C, D, or F. But if you're giving them a B and they were good, it kind of punishes them numerically in their overall grade because they didn't get the exemplary A. So if you're deciding what your target or proficient level is, that top level performance, give them the numbers there. You can always add extra credit in your grade book. So that's kind of where we encourage people to do that in Sakai, just so you don't penalize people who met the expectations, they did what you wanted to do, and they don't get dinged on the grade for it. So for example, here, these are small ranges, first of all. This might be your minimum level that you say, yes, you did what I wanted you to do, but I was really expecting these. So this is really the A-B paper. This would be, numerically a D or C paper, but they were skillful. So it kind of sends a mixed message to students. If these numbers and levels and descriptors aren't kind of aligned to something of what you're really expecting as an instructor. So let's talk about how we build rubrics with Sakai now that you know the theory about how they should be structured. So in Sakai, you may typically have rubrics turned on by default. I believe it's part of the basic template, but it's also a part of many templates, especially for master and courses for online and hybrid, where we do build custom templates for specific assignments. So if you don't see it in your tool menu, on the left side. You'll go to Site Info, you'll turn on a tool, the Rubrics tool, and then you can go there and it will host some templates for you. Some courses come with generic templates that we have made in this institution, but we can always, we can also customize those or make ones that are very specific to the various assignment that you're doing. So here's an example of several rubrics that are hosted in a course and some of the actions on them. These are ones that are available to your site only, so your course. If you'd scroll down, there would be a list of stuff that's publicly available. So these are things other people in the institution have allowed to be shared, and you can take and copy them and manipulate them the way you want to. So a lot of these that are shared are usually department rubrics that have been created. They're general writing, general speech, general presentation kind of stuff. But these are specific to your course only. If it has a pencil icon, that means you can edit it. You can change the name, the descriptor levels, the points, the order of way the tasks are on the rubric. If it's got a locked symbol down here, it is applied to something like a discussion, a gradebook item, an assignment, test, or quiz, meaning it's already going to something. So especially when your course is live, that is your indicator that maybe you don't want to tweak the rubric because students have already had access to it versus one that's kind of in draft form, yet you as an instructor are the only one that can see it at that point. So when you build a rubric, you can go to the rubrics tool. There's a button called Add, and this will create one from scratch. And the pencil icon that will appear on all the boxes are an indicator that you can change something in that box. So in Sakai, the tasks are called criterion, and you can give it a name. You can even give it a description if you want about what you're looking for, but those really should apply to the levels of performance, if it's proficient, if it's unacceptable, so on. And this indicator here means you can drag and drop things in order. So if you're going to look at spelling first and then the references second, and the idea is third, you organize these into the levels. The title, so for here, you've added a criterion, say it's spelling. The rating tile is what those columns would be. So this meets expectations. We have a lot of people who have target as a word, or acceptable or accurate or something like that, and how many points you want it to be. And then here is the description of where you write that very specific verb heavy description of what that performance is going to look like if they do meet expectations, if they didn't meet expectations, if it was missing, and what were you missing in that category. And here's where the points should be small. So as you create each task level, the points here will be the minimum they can get in that category. If you apply the rubric later and want to change, say you have a 1 and then you go to a 4, if there was a 2 or 3 that you wanted to give instead, you would have to manually override that on the individual rubric for that individual student. So if you want to create rubrics and share them, if you go to the rubrics tool and you scroll down to the bottom, there is a little accordion button here that says shared. That will bring up a list that you can sort through by alphabetical or date or so on of the shared rubrics that other people in the institution have allowed to be shared in Sakai. By default, your rubrics are private, just for that one course, that section. If you make a good rubric or you're making one for your department, you can create with there's a little eyeball icon where it's slashed and it's private. If you want to make it public, you can click that icon. It'll default to the next to being shared, and it'll appear in that list of shared rubrics for other people to get. So this is very helpful among departments who want to use similar rubrics together. When you find one that you like or you want to start with, this icon means duplicate. It takes that shared rubric and it copies it into your site and makes a private version of it for you to manipulate in the way that you want. So if you go into shared, you can kind of browse these. The caveat is These have not been reviewed. They may or may not be good. They may not be applicable, but they are something that you can go see how other people are kind of doing their stuff. So the rationale for copying versus building your own depends on what it is you're evaluating. Anyone in the institution can create or share a rubric, but not necessarily everyone's creating good ones. So, for example, here, this one has a description of the category, but it doesn't tell you the difference between what's acceptable versus developing versus unacceptable. So this would be harder for someone to use to grade because you don't know what you're looking for in the differences between the performance levels. And because the points are pretty big, it's either an F or like an A or a B. So that's a big jump. So there would need to be something kind of in between here about, did you get most of it? Did you get some of it? Did you get very little of it? Or did you not attempt it? So that's where these are kind of not as helpful to share or use with some other people. See over here, there is a very specific. They nailed it. They're pretty good. They were struggling, or no, they didn't even attempt the answer. And also a caveat, in Sakai, these can go left or right. You can either have the low points on this side, or you can have the low points on the other side. It's totally instructor dependent. It's up to you how you want to structure it, and you can drag and drop these around. So now let's say how you're going to grade with rubrics once you've built one the way that you need it to be. If you're going to attach it to an assignment is something in the assignments tool where you're collecting something from work. When you go down to the grading icon and you have this box here that asks you, do you want to use a rubric or not? It will default to not using a rubric. But if you have things built in, this little drop-down box will show you all the titles of the rubrics you've created that are private and available to your course. And if you forget what they look like or what the details were, this little preview button will bring up a window of that specific rubric so you can remember if that's the one you want to use, especially if you have a few generic rubrics, like one for writing or one for presentations and so on. These can be very specific. And when I mentioned before that you can adjust the points, so you have, a 1, a 5, a 10, but you want to give someone like a 4, here's where you would need to do that. You would click this button, so that allows you as the instructor, when you are grading this assignment, that you can put a number that's different from what the minimum points are for that level for that student. And a best practice is to use the comments button on that row to explain why they got that point versus the minimum of the other ones, just as a feedback for the student. And if you want this assignment with the rubric, to go to the gradebook and calculate the overall grades, this button here should be checked so that score that's being, as you click on the boxes of a rubric and that math is factoring in the background, that it also factors into the overall points of your grade. So that's a very key piece here. And if you forget to do this when you're initially creating the assignment, that's fine. You can go back and edit this box here, and it will automatically start putting those grades into the grade book, or you can adjust them as you're grading. To attach a rubric to a forum or discussion, it's a similar way. You have to create a manual item in the gradebook because discussions are kind of a different tool. You create an item in the gradebook that says discussions. And so for here, an example of a forum, how many points it was, and then the same dial buttons of using a rubric or not using a rubric, the drop-down menu of what the ones you have that are privately in your site that you get to select. Then make sure that it's going to calculate in their gradebook and that you release the item to the students. So when that score is in there, the student can see it in the gradebook version on their end. And then when you're grading, you can see that there's a rubric here that's selected, and you can preview it if you forget what it looks like or what the details were of that specific one. When you grade an assignment that has a rubric attached, it will have an indicator when in your version of the gradebook. So here's an example of the assignments tool, and there's a couple assignments that are created. and there's a little rubric icon that indicates something is attached to this. So if you were to see these rubrics in the rubrics tool, they would have the little lock icon to indicate that this is happening over here in this tool. If you forget what the rubric was, again, you can click on that little icon. The rubric's going to pop up in a window so you can remind yourself what it contains. And then over here is what it kind of looks like as the instructor. So you have the student, you have a grading rubric tab here. This will open up the preview window and you can click how you want it to have. You can add feedback if you want, but if you're using a very solidly built rubric, most of that's taken care of by those descriptor levels. And then as you click, that math is being calculated in the background of how many points this box was worth, and so on. And it'll give you a total that's going to go to the grade book. And you can save or release to the student if you want. If they didn't do well on the assignment, they didn't get all the points, here's where you can allow them to resubmit, and then you can grade them again with the same rubric. So in this case, you might want to put a comment about what maybe they need to change. So the indicator is going to be a little bit different if you have included a personal feedback in that section. But you can keep grading with the same rubric. Maybe they moved up a level in performance, and so you can keep grading it with that same rubric. So when you're looking at a discussion with a rubric, you go to the discussions tool and open up the post, and you can see that whatever they've read, and then the grade button will bring up the window. It'll bring up the same rubric. You can click, you can do the comments, you can override if you've allowed that to happen, and then submit the grade, and it's going to the grade book to do the calculation in the overall grade. There's a new improved button with the upgrade that we did this summer to discussions. So in the discussions tool, there's a tab called statistics and grading, and you can now see all your students and how many they've authored and how many they've replied to. And then this is the total of those combined. You can see a percentage of how many things that they have read, which means they have clicked on it and opened that piece of text. So this can help you in determining how you want to grade if your discussion rubric is got a piece about participation, about responses. How many responses did you want? Is there a percentage of things you want to have read or have posted or replied to? So this is helpful to look at as you go through their responses, look at the data of what they've actually done, and then you can go back to the rubric and actually apply that piece. Once you have a rubric attached to something that's going to the gradebook, there's an indicator in the gradebook as well. So here's a screenshot of a gradebook in which this item has a rubric attached. And so when you click on to edit this item, you can see a preview of what the rubric was and so on, just like you can anywhere else. And there's the total. So if you were allowing someone to resubmit because they didn't get full points or they got low points on a rubric, you could allow resubmission. The feedback is based on the boxes that you've clicked on their performance levels. And when they resubmit again, and you click on different performance levels at this point, it will update in your gradebook. So for this example, they initially got a 1. They were allowed to resubmit. They regraded with a rubric. Now the score is 6, and it is affected the overall grade because it will do it like that in the background. So having these rubrics can actually help you push the students to do better each time if you give them, 1 or 2 resubmissions to try to get up in those performance levels. If there's anything else that we didn't cover today, or you want to know more stuff about how to do things in Sakai, we do have self-paced courses that can help you do those advanced things. We're also created a new page that's now on SharePoint. And this link we'll give to you here in a bit, where you can go. We have lots of articles, we have videos, we have slide presentations that we've done before about other stuff of Sakai. And if you want to know those specific things, you want to self-enroll or you want to self-pace a course about these things, these kind of things we do have available. So I'm going to, this picture. There is a new help ticket way or guide available in Sakai. Since the upgrade in July, we are now using Sakai 23 because that's the 23rd version. In your overview page of Sakai, when you log in, there is now a link to this new help guide. You can also go wherever you are in Sakai, there will be a little question mark in the top right corner that will also take you to the guide. So there's multiple ways to get to it. If there's something specific you're looking for that you can't find, you can always make a help ticket and choose the Sakai from the drop down. It'll come to the Center for Teaching, Learning, and Online Education office, and we can go look specifically in your course, your account, whatever you're looking for that you need help with. We've also included links to other things in the university or outside resources that you might need help with. For example, if you're having an assessment with a rubric, but you've also used like Lockdown browser, there's a link here to help you with. If you need help writing stuff, you can make a ticket and an instruction designer can help you. You can also get help from the Writing Center about writing those descriptive letter or levels. If there's something in the library that you need, like an article that you want to apply a discussion rubric to, you can use the library articles. So there's lots of help here for you because some things have updated. Let me check chat to see if there's any questions. If there's not, we will stop the recording, and then if you need anything, you can make a help ticket.
Corey,
Yes.
I was just gonna ask you, I have always used rubric for assignment, but I always have a hard time with forums. When I'm trying to grade, like I, for some reason, cannot find it. So right now I'm trying to add a rubric to one of my courses. So I'm just like, I'm gonna just use like the one from public rubric that we have. If I want to add that, do I just click on a copy button or?
So let me show you in a course. So in this course, there is a discussions rubric.
Yeah.
And the computer's being slow. It has kind of basic levels. Did they post? Did they respond to 3 to 4? And then that's a level. This is 2 to 2 or less or whatever. Right. Was it on time and was it, correct? So this discussion rubric, when we go to the grade book, and I edit the item, here's where I get to select it. Because it's in my rubrics tool for this particular course. So you need to copy it from wherever you're taking it from first. So it's in your version, and then you can apply it to your gradebook item.
Okay.
And then this preview will show you the same format it was before.
And then when you grade it, you go to gradebook to grade it, right? You cannot just grade it in the discussion.
You go to discussions. This one doesn't, this was a master, so this doesn't have anything. But when you would go to, well, I can't show you real student data. But if we had a data and it was red, you would see all those posts. And when you click on a student, there's a grade tab. And you can see a preview of the rubric or not.
Okay.
Or you can open another tab in a different browser and have it if you need it to see it. There is a new version of the grader if you want to turn it on. Let's see, does this one have a discussion? Okay, so I'm going to grade this one. If I was to read this one and grade, my rubric is here.
Okay.
Yeah. And I can click, but I could also use comments if I wanted to overall have comments. But if I wanted to give different points, say I wanted to give a 4, I could make a comment here and override it.
It looks just like the assignment.
Yeah.
Right.
And it will go right to the gradebook and factor automatically after you hit submit.
Well, thank you so much. That was my only question for today.
Okay. I will stop the recording here and I will share the video and the presentation with you here shortly.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Bye, Corey.